So let's bring Sean Rowe up here. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Jeff Polish, and thanks to all of you. This is my second time at the Monti. The first time around, is that too loud? No. The first time around, I told you what it was like to have Thanksgiving dinner in the Wake County Jail. That's right. And tonight I'd like to share a few thoughts about my first love, breasts. Breasts. Breasts is kind of a hard word to pronounce, so sometimes here in the Southland we say breastises, and that's a good thing. But I don't know if my fondness for breasts is something unusual. I'll get into that a little bit later. But what I'm certain of is that I've had a very unusual relationship to breasts. And it started like this. Once upon a time, about a decade ago, I was sitting around at my favorite coffee shop, Melissa. And I was sitting at my favorite coffee shop not drinking coffee. And the reason was that my checking account was horribly overdrawn, and I had exactly 29 cents in my pocket. So while I was sitting there not drinking coffee, I was also looking at the want ads. I was looking for a job. And lucky for me, pretty soon a want ad fairly leapt out of the newspaper. And here's what it said. It said, "Writer wanted, full-time, please respond to Adam and Eve, Hillsborough, North Carolina." This is how my career at Adam and Eve began, my career at America's most trusted vendor of adult products. And so for the next 5 years, I sat at a desk day in and day out, and I wrote one-paragraph descriptions of sex toys and pornographic videos. Now, I'm not sure in retrospect what I imagined I was getting myself into. I suppose I thought that my boss certainly would be a woman, and that she would come to work dressed in black leather and stiletto heels, and that she would carry a whip. And, maybe us writers would sit in some kind of dungeon and write, slavish paragraphs about her beautiful breasts. And I guess I imagined that my female coworkers would wear spandex, and there would be things like Topless Tuesday. But whatever else was true, I certainly imagined that there would be lots of breasts involved in this. There would be big breasts and small breasts and everything in between, suntan breasts and pale-skinned breasts. Somewhere in the mix, lots of breasts. And I would be the happiest man on earth. I would, go to work every morning and set sail on a sea of estrogen. Now, as it turned out, the reality was quite different from what I imagined. First of all, my boss turned out to be a short, middle-aged, very kindly man. And my coworkers dressed just like your coworkers probably do. Very quickly, I found out that the sex toys that this company was selling were not developed and manufactured there in Hillsborough. They were made in Taiwan. And the pornographic movies were not shot on location in Hillsborough. They were shot on location in the San Fernando Valley, north of Los Angeles. Yeah. So there was a lot of things that were not going on out there. What was, and where were the breasts? Well, then and now, there are three things going on out there in Hillsborough at Adam and Eve. First of all, on the ground floor of this office building, there's a gigantic international call center that's open 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And customers call in, and they order their dildos and lingerie and their movies that have titles like San Fernando Jones and the Temple of Poon. So there's the call center. There's also a warehouse, 50,000 square feet, where 100 of my coworkers in 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, are boxing up this merchandise and sending it off to the customers. And finally, there's a big marketing department on the 3rd floor, which is where I came in. And the marketing department does a lot of things, but its main thrust, if you will forgive me, is to think up and produce these catalogs that go out to millions of potential customers, and they talk the customer into buying the sex toys and the porn movies in the first place. So it's a big circle, a big smoothly running machine, but again, where are the breasts? Well, I'm about to tell you. I should mention that the office building was very much like how I imagine IBM looks. It was clean and air-conditioned and orderly and quiet. But on the bathroom doors, that was different. One said Adam, the other said Eve. But yeah, where were the breasts? Well, it turned out that the breasts, my first love, were entirely confined to these movies. And lucky for me, it turned out that I was not very good at writing descriptions of these sex toys. But I just didn't have a kinship with them. I had no idea what some of them were meant for, but it turned out I was quite good at describing these movies, and I got fast at it. And pretty soon I was processing 10 or 12 of these movies a day. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's physically impossible to watch 8 or 10 or 10 or 12 pornographic movies in the scope of an 8-hour workday and still have time for lunch. Well, it is. And here's how I did it. I would take the box cover from the movie or the jewel case of the DVD, and I would look at it, and there would be a naked woman on it, and there would be her breasts. And I would take the movie and put it in this player, a screener, and I would sort of skim through it, and I would hit the highlights. I would sort of slalom or water ski through this lake of breasts from one to the other, and that's how I did it. But I know the other thing you're thinking is that this was a lot of breasts, and it was. They added up, and I'll say a word on that later. Now, everything was fine for a while, for a long while. But one day I noticed that I was paying a lot of attention to the swimming pools in these movies. I was becoming a connoisseur of swimming pools, and I wasn't paying attention to the breasts as much. What was going on? Was it breast boredom? Then one day, something happened. I was watching a movie that featured one of my favorite porn stars, and she was in the throes of ecstasy. And she was going like this. Now, that's not what's supposed to happen in a porn movie. And the very next day, I caught myself doing exactly the same thing. I yawned. But breast boredom, in the end, was not my biggest enemy. It was breast overwhelmment. 10 or 12 of these movies a day, 250 work days in a year, 5 years out there, it really adds up. And it adds up more than you may realize, because the American porn movie is a very rigid art form. It's, if you'll forgive the pun, it is divided into 5 acts or scenes, typically. And each act, each scene features a different porn star, a different woman. And then one of the scenes is this obligatory pseudo-lesbian scene. So there are 2 women in that scene. So that's a total of 6 women per movie, or 12 breasts. Times 10 or 12 movies, blah, blah, blah. And if you add it up, I find I have done this, and it comes out to about 250,000 different breasts. Smoking breaks did not help with this. I would take a break from the breasts, and I would go downstairs and outside and across the parking lot to have a cigarette. The whole building was a non-smoking zone, and but there would be my female colleagues. There would be, Jennifer from the call center, who had really large breasts, and there would be Cindy or Zoe, the graphic artist, who had medium-sized breasts, and there would be Cindy from the warehouse, who was flat-chested, but there was no escape. And finally, I started going home at night and having this horrible dream. In the dream, I was on my way to a party. And when I got to the party, the room was filled with porn stars, except that the closer I looked in the dream, they weren't porn stars. They were every single one of my ex-girlfriends. And they had nothing in common except me. So that's what they were talking about. And they were rehashing loudly all of my faults and failings. This was somehow or other the beginning of the end of my career at Adam and Eve. And imagine that you went to work in an ice cream factory, and 5 years later you emerged from this experience. What would your relationship to ice cream be like? Well, there are 3 possibilities as I see it. Either you would still love ice cream and weigh 500 pounds, or you would weigh the same amount, but you would have completely lost interest in ice cream. Or if you were very lucky, you would wind up as I did, and that is that you would still love ice cream, and you'd weigh about the same. I never thought too much about my years at Adam and Eve after I had done it. I just thought I answered a newspaper ad. But recently, as I was preparing this story, I went to see a very skilled and very inexpensive psychiatrist named Jeff Polish. And Dr. Polish suggested to me that maybe I was abnormal. Maybe I had an obsession with breasts. He reminded me that for Christmas I had given him a 2009 Hot Pirate Babes calendar. And he reminded me that when VisArt Video recently closed one of their stores in Chapel Hill, I'd bought a bunch of movies, and one of them was a documentary entitled Breasts. So he said, "Sean, maybe you were weaned from your mother too young." I don't believe any of this is true. Or I think that Dr. Polish, the psychiatrist, is both right and wrong. Yes, I'm obsessed with breasts, but I'm not abnormal. This obsession with breasts is entirely normal. But by way of closing, I will tell you that since I resigned from Adam and Eve, I have never seen a porn movie. Thank you.
Sean Rowe.